thank you for watching my channel today. My name's Sarah and my channel is called Your True Self, and I'm doing a wrap up for the first time in absolutely ages. I did a Friday reads in December when I talked about some books I was reading, but I haven't done an actual proper wrap up for who knows how long. So I'm not going to go through every single book that I've read since I did the Friday reads, because some of them I was nearly finished with at that point and I talked about them. A couple made it into my best books of the year list, so I feel like I've already talked about those ones. So I'm going to just start from the beginning of January and talk about the 9 books that I read in January. And I had a brilliant start to the year, so I was a little bit slumpy towards the end of last year. If you look at my stats on Storygraph, I had the least pages read towards the end of the year, and I feel like January really sort of kicked up a notch and I enjoyed my reading a lot more, and yeah, so I feel like January's been an excellent month. I had 3 5-star reads, which was an amazing start to the year. So the first book that I read this year was a reread for me, and it was The Dutch House by Anne Patchett, which we had for our work book club, and I was very happy to reread this because it was my best book of the year in 2020, because I remember listening to it when it was lockdown and I was running, and I listened to the Audible of this because it's read by Tom Hanks, which is just a dream because he has such a lovely voice and it really brought the book to life for me. The Dutch House is about a brother and a sister called Danny and Maeve, and Danny and Maeve's mother leaves when they're really small. So I think Maeve's about 11 and Danny's about 6, and she's left because the Dutch house is a house that their father bought for the family, which is an enormous, beautiful house which was built by a Dutch family who lived there before. And the mother feels really uncomfortable living in this grandiose wealth and having servants. She finds it really uncomfortable, and so she leaves and goes off to do charity work. And the dad is sort of not really at ease with being a parent, and he marries again quite quickly, and the new wife, Andrea, comes into their lives with her 2 daughters, and Danny and Maeve's life just kind of completely goes in another direction because this other woman has come into the house and she doesn't really want Danny and Maeve there. So we follow them throughout their lives. We do jumping around in time, so sometimes we'll be in their childhood, sometimes they'll be adults, and then they'll go back to being older adults and then children again, but it's not confusing. And the writing is exquisite, the relationships are wonderful, the characters are really well fleshed out, and I just could really, really resonate with this book and absolutely loved it. So it was still a 5-star read for me on my second reading. The next book I read was one I read on Kindle. I'd had it for ages, and I needed something to read alongside a buddy read I was doing for sort of in between bits of buddy read, and that was Chasing Lucky by Jenn Bennett. So this is a YA romance. It's a book set in America. We are following a young girl called Josephine, and she is with her mum. Her mum is a single parent and she moves them from place to place a lot, and so Josephine never really feels that she gets settled in one area. She has to come back to her grandma's bookshop because the grandma is going abroad for a year and wants Josephine and her mum to come and look after the bookshop. And this is the place where she grew up for the longest time before they started moving around. And her best friend Lucky, who's a boy, was somebody that she was really close with, but when they moved then they sort of lost touch. And when she comes back, Josephine is really into photography and her dad's a famous photographer, and she's trying really hard to build up a portfolio so that he might help her in her photography career and let her do an apprenticeship with him. And she ends up really early on in the book, she gets in an argument with this sort of rich, bratty teenage boy who his family own a department store, and she throws a stone at the sign for the department store, and instead of hitting the sign, it smashes the glass front of the store, and the police come, and they think that Lucky did it, and he says that he will take the fall for what happened. And so basically it's them reconnecting and romance blossoming, and sort of the consequences of Lucky saying that it was him who committed this kind of act of vandalism. So it's a small town romance. It's quite sweet and light-hearted, and it was just a nice kind of in-between book for me. I gave 3.5 stars, and yeah, it was just a cute book. Then I got to choose my first book from my TBR spin pile. So the prompt that we got was to read the book we were most looking forward to in our TBR spin stack. And I chose this one, which is Father of the Rain by Lily King. This is quite a tall book, and it's really lovely and floppy. You know, when you can easily open the pages and you don't have to crack the spine. So I got this one secondhand, and I have read Writers and Lovers by Lily King twice, and that book's been 5 stars for me both times. I read Tuesdays in Winter, which is her short story collection, and I also read Euphoria, which I didn't really like that much, but I want to try it again because all have other things I've loved so much. So this was my next book by Lily King, and this was absolutely wonderful. So this is written quite a while ago now. This was written in 2010, and we're following Daly. Daly is, when the book starts, a child who is about 10, I want to say, something like that, and she lives with her brother and her parents, and her dad is a real bigot. He's very prejudiced, and he is a drinker. And he's like a functioning alcoholic. So he is a member of the community. He's successful in his work. They live in a nice house, but he starts making cocktails and spirits and stuff sort of by 12 o'clock every day. And he drinks all the way through sort of the afternoon and the evening when he's not at work. And they have dogs, and he really loves the dogs, but he's kind of not the best dad to the kids. And his wife, decides she's had enough of all the drinking and everything, and she wants to leave. And quite quickly after Daly and her mum have left, the dad gets with a new woman who is also a functioning alcoholic and has a child already who's one of Daly's classmates. And we follow Daly through her life. So there are quite big jumps in time. So she's quite a small kid. Then she'll be a teenager. Then she'll be kind of university age. And then she'll be sort of in her, I want to say 30s probably when the book finishes. And this is just really focusing on Daly's relationship with her dad, and how even though her dad is awful to her, and how the alcoholism ruins the family, she still loves him and she still wants to help him. And even when everyone's telling her, don't just let him go because he's not going to bring anything good to your life, she can't let that relationship go. She has to keep coming back to him when he calls. How the relationship progresses, I can't say anything because I don't want to spoil it, but I just felt this was a real masterpiece of a book, and it really moves you, and the relationships just feel very believable in this book. And so I think Lily King is one of those authors where I want to try and read their complete works, and every time she brings out another book, I'll be reading it because I just think she's such a gifted writer. So yes, that was a great start for my TBR spin. I then finished a series. Well done to me, because as you know, I'm focusing on finishing series this year. And I finished the last book in the Wolf Den trilogy by Elodie Harper. So this one is called The Temple of Fortuna. And I've talked about the Wolf Den series many times, so I'm not going to just keep saying the same thing. But very briefly, it's set in 1st century Italy, and we're following Amara, who started her life as a doctor's daughter as a child. And when her dad died, she was given as a concubine to a man and sadly sold into slavery as a sex worker. and she starts her adult life in the Wolf Den, which is a brothel where she makes a found family with some other women who are there. And we follow her throughout her journey as she is trying desperately to become free, and she's very, very cunning and witty and strategizing to try and get what she needs for her own safety and her freedom. And this is the last installment, which includes, because they're living in Pompeii, it includes the eruption of Mount Etna, and the scenes when the volcano erupts are amazing. They're so evocative, and I guess I'd never really thought about what it would feel like to be in an area where there was a volcano exploding, and things that I hadn't thought of, like it would be pitch black because the light's obliterated by all of the smoke and all the volcanic gases and everything, and so people can't see, so there's all this going on and you can't see, and your people are getting lost, and all of the things, and how much debris was coming down from the sky. It was something, when I looked it up, it was like 500,000 tons a second or something completely. I couldn't get my head around how much stuff was falling from the sky. So people were like tying pillows to their heads to try and protect their heads from falling rock and stuff. And yeah, it was incredible. And the whole book, the whole series, if you like historical fiction and you want to feel like the characters get into your heart and stay there and that you'll miss them afterwards, then I'd highly recommend the Wolf Den trilogy. And that was my other 5-star read for January. The next book I had was for Ben's Read Good Challenge, where January becomes Annuary, and the prompt is to read a book where the author's name is Anne or a derivative of Anne. And again, this was progress in series, so I read book number 5 out of 6 in the Pages & Co series, which is a middle grade series by Anna James, and this one was called The Treehouse Library. So the premise of these books is that we're following Tilly, who is a young girl whose grandparents own a bookshop called Pages & Co, and Tilly and her family can book wander, which means that they can go inside stories and interact with the characters. And they have different adventures because there are kind of bad people who are trying to stop people book wandering, who are trying to change source editions of books. So they're trying to change people's ability to book wander, sometimes the plots, sealing books off, that kind of thing. And there's in this book there is somebody who's trying to harm Tilly and her family. So they're really nice children's adventure stories. They're very obviously book focused, and anyone who likes middle grade, I would highly recommend. This one I gave 3.5 stars, and I am really looking forward to reading book number 6, which will be me completing another series, which is wonderful. So that's that one. I then read a book against my better judgment, really, which everybody keeps raving about, and I got a bit sick of hearing about it, to be honest, and it kept making people's best books of the year list. And so I thought, right, I don't think this is my kind of book, but I'm obviously wrong because everyone loves it, and so I'm going to try and read it anyway. And I should have listened to my instincts, really. So this was I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman, translated by Roz Schwartz. So I don't really think I need to go over the premise, but essentially there are 30, I think, women who are in an underground bunker which is patrolled by guards. They're given food, they're given water, they have light and heat and stuff like that, but they don't know why they're there, they don't know what's going on outside. And one girl, who's our protagonist, has been, she can't remember life before the bunker, she can't read or write, she wants to understand about the world, she doesn't know anything about anything really on the outside world, and she wants the other women to tell her, but they kind of feel like, what's the point, because we're just stuck in this bunker forever. And then one day, as their guards are unlocking the doors to give them their food, this alarm goes off and all of the guards just flee, and the women are free to escape and to try and figure out what the hell's going on. And what's going on outside and all of those kind of things. So it's a kind of a end of the world post-apocalyptic type story, and I just don't like those. I love historical stuff because I guess we've kind of lived through those times. I don't really like stuff about all the world's going to be so dark and scary and horrible in the future kind of stories, and I definitely don't like sort of environmental disaster stories, and you don't really get answers on any of the stuff. And it's a really clever idea. It's quite an old book. It's just had this massive resurgence for some reason, and I think that it was well written, and I think that the author had some very clever points and did the book really well. It just isn't my kind of book, and so I just feel like I probably should have listened to my instincts and said, I'm glad everyone else is really enjoying this book, but it isn't for me. So I don't think it really helped that my cat was really poorly and ended up being put to sleep while I was reading this book. So we were going through a really horrible time, and this book is really quite bleak, and I don't think it was a good time to be reading it. I got it from the library on audio, and so I had to just listen to it when it came in, but the timing wasn't ideal. So I gave that one 3.25 stars because I didn't enjoy it really, but I could appreciate why other people did. Next, I wanted something that was more uplifting and positive, and again, because of the really sad circumstances that we were going through at the time, my next audiobook I chose was Getting Better by Michael Rosen. So for people who are not in the UK, Michael Rosen is a children's author and poet, and he's done a lot of work with in the BBC and working with children's television and that kind of thing, and he's quite a national treasure in our country. He writes really funny poems. I can remember being in primary school, and my teacher, when I was about 10, she used to read in assembly these poems which were about this little boy called Eddie, and they were really funny, and I didn't realise until much later that Eddie was Michael Rosen's son and the poems were by him, and my kids love those poems now. And Eddie really, really sadly died when he was 18. He had meningitis, and so Michael Rosen was bereaved of his son. And Michael also had COVID in the first wave, and he was in intensive care in a coma for 40 days. And so he has been through both of those really, really awful things, but he also has a chronic illness, which I won't say what it is because it's kind of part of the story, how he got diagnosed and everything. And so he's been through quite a lot in his life, but he's a really, really good guy who just seems to be really kind and generous and looking for positives in difficult situations. And this whole book is about getting better. It's about why things and situations can get better, and it's about the things that he went through and how he used his sort of tips for trying to get better when you're going through difficult things. And I found it really insightful. I found it very, very honest. I feel like he really didn't shy away from opening up his heart to us and telling us exactly how he felt in certain situations, but also what he found helped and what he found didn't help, and what people say when you've lost someone like that, and how he would react and inside and things like that. And I think that it was a book which people could find really helpful. And he also talks quite a lot about his family history, having a Jewish background, and he talks about some of his relatives which died in the Holocaust and things as well. So he talks about sort of difficult things that his predecessors have gone through as well as himself. And I found it a really, really lovely and uplifting book. So if you're looking for something to help in a difficult time, then I would recommend that. And he reads the audiobook by himself, which was also a joy because he's got quite a recognisable voice. And the last two books I read, so one of them was a book that I've been reading with my children at bedtime. It's book 2 in a series, and this is Wundersmith by Morrigan Crow. Sorry, not by Morrigan Crow. Wundersmith by Jessica Townsend. The main character is called Morrigan Crow. The covers are a delight of these books. This is the second book. There's currently 3 books out, so we're now reading the third book together. Book 4 has been delayed many times, and it was supposed to come out at least 2 years ago when I pre-ordered it, and now it's coming out in, I think, May, but we'll see. I'm not holding my breath in case it gets postponed again. So this is a middle grade series about Morrigan Crow, who has always thought that she was destined to die on her 12th birthday. That's what she was told for her whole childhood, that she was cursed. And then on her 12th birthday, a lovely man with a bushy ginger beard called Jupiter North turns up and takes her away to a place called Nevermore. And she has to compete to try and get into this magical school called the Wondrous Society. And it's once she, I mean, I feel like it's not a huge spoiler to say that she gets in, because that's what the rest of the books are about. That would kind of be like saying that I won't tell you if Harry Potter gets into Hogwarts, because it's kind of obvious, because that's what the whole series is about. So yeah, it's about her and her friends, and she has she is a Wundersmith. Wonder is like the kind of magical energy that exists in the world, and she is a Wundersmith is someone who can control or learn to control that energy. And Wundersmiths in previous times have all been bad guys, so people are quite wary of her. So that is it's a really good fantasy series for younger readers. It's quite, I'd say it's for sort of older middle grade readers really, and the books are quite long. They're about sort of 400 pages each. They keep you really engaged, and I think they're really, really lovely books. I think anyone who likes Harry Potter would like these books. Book 3 is called Hollowpox, which we are now reading, and then book 4 is, I think it's called Silverborn, which is, like I say, coming out soon. And then the last book, where the light is really fading now, so hopefully I'm still, I'm not looking like too much shade in the room. Anyhow, the last book that I read is Rosewater by Liv Little, and this was a book I got on my Kindle in the last year. This is following a young woman called Elsie. So she's about in her late 20s, early 30s. I think she's late 20s. And she's living in London in a really tiny apartment. She's trying to make it as a poet and to earn money. She's working in a bar, and she's kind of, her life's a little bit chaotic. She's having like lots of different sort of short-term relationships. And one morning she gets there's all this banging on the door. It's basically bailiffs telling her like she's ignored all of her notices about her overdue rent, and they're coming to evict her, and she has like an hour to get all her stuff and go. She doesn't have anywhere to go. She has a difficult relationship with her parents who live in Bristol, and she really doesn't want to go back. She's really close to her nan, but her nan lives in Bristol, and she doesn't really, like I said, she doesn't want to go back there. And so she calls her best friend Juliet, who they haven't been in touch for a few months because something happened. And Juliet's like, that's absolutely fine, you can come and stay with me. And Juliet's life is more together than Elsie's. She's got her own place. She's working as a teacher, but she also does like cam girl work, which I'm not sure how that actually aligns with teaching. In that I'm not sure that you could work in a job of where you're in a position of responsibility for young people if you do that kind of work on the side. I'm not sure how, but anyhow, so she has to keep that kind of a secret, but it's helping her be financially secure. And Elsie is queer, and she has feelings for Juliet. She's not sure whether Juliet has feelings for her, and so it's this kind of exploration of their friendship and whether it can be anything more than a friendship, as well as the difficulties they have with their families and family relationships. They're both black women, so there's a lot about queer black spaces and poetry for queer black women and different things like that as well. So that's also a big element to the story. And I found it to be really good up until the last 20%, when the plot took a bit of a weird twist, which I feel like a plot device was used where there didn't need to be a plot device, almost like the author had got a little bit stuck and she wasn't quite sure how she was going to wrap it up. So I didn't really like how that happened. Other than that, I thought the writing was good. I felt like we got to know the characters. All I would say is I think I prefer a less contemporary setting. It was like bang up to the present moment in terms of when it was set. And I guess I like things which were set a little bit longer ago than this, but I found the topics really engaging and I'd still recommend it. I gave that one 3.75 stars. So that is my wrap up of everything I read in January. I'd really like to hear your thoughts if you read any of those books, and if you'd like to pick them up based on what I said, if you haven't read them already. And I will be back with another video soon. I hope that you have a really lovely week. Make sure you tell me what you're reading in the comments or any favourites that you've had in January, and I will speak to you all soon. Bye.